purpose can fuel performance. Genuinely believe that to be true, have seen it, have been part of building towards that. When you know who you are and why you can be in a position to try to tackle something bigger than you'll ever be able to accomplish, but you're always in pursuit of. That to me is where you start to connect with your consumers and your categories beyond the items that you sell.
In today's world, how does a brand break through the noise and become iconic? Join me, Jason Harris, as I speak with the world's leading marketing experts about how they use soul and science to build an iconic brand. Think of it as EQ meeting IQ. So let's lock in and together fast forward our marketing minds on the Soul and Science podcast. On today's episode of Soul and Science, we're exploring the rapidly shifting world of modern parenthood, a place where millennial and Gen Z parents demand authenticity, transparency, and brands that actually understand how they live their lives. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Crockett, the new CMO at Carter's. She spent her career building emotionally resonant brands across outdoor, lifestyle, and retail. Together today, we are going to unpack the soul and science behind connecting with the most values-driven and possibly the most overwhelmed generation of parents ever, period, full stop. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jason. What a powerful introduction. Looking forward to this discussion.
Okay, good. Before we get into the overwhelmed, values-driven generation that you're targeting, and we talk about Carter's, I'd love for you to give me a quick background. I know you've worked at Backcountry, Dickies, a bunch of places. So kind of give me a little career background for our listeners as a setup to our conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I am a career marketer, a brand enthusiast. I'm very thankful that pretty early on in my career, I realized that I needed to attach myself to brands that I believed in and had a personal connection to, whether that was I'm a consumer of the category or I'm a believer in their mission or the purpose. So that is really what's been coloring my career, and it's allowed me to work in places that do find that special overlap of personal passion and professional contributions. I'm an avid outdoors person, so I spend as much time in the outdoors recreating, from snowboarding to paddling to backpacking to camping, whatever it may be. So I found myself spending a lot of time in that space. I also have an affinity for culture and lifestyle, and any brand that I enter, I really work to find that intersection of culture with the DNA of the brand, because I think that's such a special overlap. I'm a mother, and my soon to be 14-year-old, a little bit older than our typical consumer at Carter's, but the days of raising him as an infant and toddler and little kiddo are not far behind me. So I certainly find that I can relate to so many of our parents out there.
And what do you think the biggest, if you had to put it into, ambition, goal, what you're trying to do at Carter's? What is the 1 to 3 year ambition?
Yeah, we have a lot of big ambitions. I think I can simplify it by saying we are aspiring and working hard to be the industry leader that we are, that really connects with our consumer base above and beyond the products that we sell. We are part of the community. We want to contribute to that community. We want to break through in disruptive storytelling, and not for disruptive sake, but simply because we're producing and connecting with these consumers in a way that they simply haven't experienced yet, but have been asking for decades and decades. We see the opportunity to change the narrative that is reported pretty widely in our category around parents just not seeing themselves, or communities who raise children together not seeing themselves in our space. We've contributed to that. We recognize that, and we are committed to ensuring that our future is built on connecting with our consumers in ways that feel real and authentic and not manufactured moments.
I'm a new parent. I have a
Congratulations.
daughter who, thank you, Sue's about 16 months old.
Just starting to sleep, maybe?
She sleeps pretty well, actually.
Good for you.
But what do you think what are the biggest differences you see between millennial Gen Z parents and maybe generations that came before?
There's so many. I'll just say this. I have so much optimism for the future when I learn more and more about Gen Z, Gen Alpha. There's some principles that this generation are showing up with in spades when it comes to quality of life, connection with their families, and how they want to raise their children in ways that all of us aspire to just be better than our own personal experience, right? So we're hearing a lot and witnessing a lot of letting the kiddo be a kiddo, right? And letting them find their own personal expression. If you can contrast that with the prior generations, there was a lot of sort of mini me behavior, and not to say that completely goes away, but children can certainly be an extension of our own personal expression. That has been a priority in past and present generations that we certainly see, but there's something really interesting happening around the notion of slowing down to allow the kiddos of this generation to have more of that healthy healthy perception of themselves. Mental health is obviously a big part of this, finding who they are in their own right, versus pushing them to become different portions of expression of our own parent roles that we play.
Do you think there's also, I don't know, this is widely reported, but there's also some economic realities that maybe the younger generation raising kids have more financial strain than maybe their parents had?
I think it's widely reported that there's a generational difference in how wealth is transferring or not. So absolutely, I think value. We hear a lot about value. What does value mean? Value to us means that you're not compromising quality, but that you're offering quality and style at a price that meets the needs of that consumer, right? So we are very much focused on continuing to be a trusted brand that delivers value. We do get credit for that. We are not losing sight of that. And I think it becomes more and more important as you see this generation come into the picture needing that value.
So one thing is value, and you have to keep that in mind in terms of promotion or pricing. And then the other that you mentioned was, I think you kind of summed it up as like a way of parenting that maybe is a little more um, slower, maybe not as intense. I don't know. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say. I think that you see that parenting takes so many different flavors, but yes, I think that absolutely is fair to say.
Another big difference might be technology integration. I don't know if parenting philosophies seem to change, but I think from what I've heard so far, it's, meeting the parents where they are. It's values important. I think I wouldn't sum it up as diversity, but maybe it's a raising kids in different ways.
Connection I think what we're hearing is this generation of parents really wants to spend the time to connect. Not saying prior generations didn't, right? Like, but I think whenever you see a tidal wave in which we've experienced over the last 20 years, and you're bringing this up when you talk about technology, technology has taken over so much of our lives over the last 20 years in a fast pace relative to other industrial era evolutions, right? I think the average age of a kid having their first screen or tablet is 2.
Wow.
So they are now kind of exposed to this technology as part of their life at a very, very early age. And I think what we're seeing is a bit of a combating of that with this new parent wanting to spend more quality time and getting to know their kid and really building those relationships above and beyond sort of just keeping busy. And again, that's oversimplifying the role that technology has played in raising kiddos with other generations, but I just think it's natural to see this cultural tension where if technology's taken over, there's going to be a generation that fights against that. You hear about it when you think flip phones are coming back, right? There's this whole conversation about teens opting out of social media. So you're starting to see that in a lot of ways that's naturally going to flow into when you start to experience new roles in your life, parenting being the one that we're talking about.
Parents today expect brands to really understand what they're going through, know their values. How do you, as the marketing person in charge of Carter's, think about your values matching the generation that you're selling to's values?
First of all, you have to take the time to understand the consumer that you're connecting with. That is something that we are building a very strong muscle in being able to do, not just once, but constantly. If anything, the last 5 years has taught us that pace is moving much faster than it ever has before. If you look at how we were talking about AI 24 months ago, as opposed to how we're talking about it today, the arc of that conversation is moving so steep and fast. So I think it's an opportunity to make sure that you're staying constantly connected with your consumer segment. That's first and foremost. Then contrast that with how do we actually learn about ourselves? What are those things that we want to keep a very tight hold of? What are the things that we want to shed as time progresses, as our consumer changes? And then finding those intersection points. So we know, as an example, that our consumers have consistently told us the number one value that they place in Carter's is trust, which I can't think of a more important value when it comes to a brand that is building a relationship with your child, right? So I think the fact that we have trust is one of those things we need to make sure that we keep and continue to morph and maintain relevance in a modern era. So it's a combination of spending time educating ourselves consistently on the segment, really understanding who we are at the core and how can we put those things together in a way that uniquely meets the needs of this consumer.
What's something that you, maybe as a customer of Carter's, but now being on the inside of Carter's, what's something that you didn't know or were surprised to learn?
One, probably my favorite example, when I first joined the organization, I learned that Carter's many years ago formed a relationship. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia. We actually are neighbors with one of the top baby hospitals in the country, Northside Hospital. Years and years ago, because of that adjacency, we built a relationship with the NICU nurses out of Northside. And we learned from them that NICU patients and parents were really struggling to find apparel for this very delicate phase of life that's pretty much always unpredictable, and that there were needs in these products. Like the kiddos needed to be able to have MRIs without being uncomfortable in the clothing or not having clothing. There's tubes that need to be routed through the kiddos' clothing to make sure that they can be monitored and their stats are being tended to. We can design collections that allow for this caretaking to take place and allow for the baby to be more comfortable. So we did, in partnership with the Northside NICU nurse team, we built a collection of product that was specifically designed for this special chapter in our parents' lives. And by doing that, we are able to, I mean, what else says trust, right? When you have experts like NICU nurses telling you what's needed and us delivering it. So that is an example of something I learned since joining the organization that we're now shouting about in partnership with world leading organizations like March of Dimes to talk about the importance of prematurity awareness and what are those things that you need to know if you're in the situation, you find yourself in the situation. So we can hopefully be a helpful shortcut in some of these things that you just don't think about. And we now have them available for our parents.
What do modern parents care about that maybe you learned working on the brand, maybe that other brands or other companies underestimate or they don't think about enough?
I think this notion of slowing down, to me, that was so intuitive, but it was also very surprising. The whole world and culture that we hear about today is fast, fast, fast. Everything is so fast, fast, fast. Everything's digital, shortcuts with AI all over the place, right? So now to hear that there's a generation of parents who are actually saying, hey, let's just let our kids be kids. We see this all the time, even in our comments in our social media threads. We have did an archive release in our Oshkosh brand in October of this year, and then we did a reissue of a collection from our past, and it is the most adorable collection that, frankly, I have seen in a long time. And it is very kiddo, like it just screams and shouts, teddy bears all over the place. These nice, happy design moments in the collection, and the comment threads are filled with parents and caregivers who are basically saying it's nice to see kids looking like kids, right? That's an example of just wanting to keep that very precious chapter of life, as pure as it can be, because we know how fast it changes once we grow up and assumptions are made and expectations start to rise. So being able to nurture in this phase and slow down to allow kids to be kids more so than in our recent past, I found that to be incredible and somewhat surprising.
What do you think? This is a Sarah question, not a
Okay.
Carter's question. You've worked at a lot of different places and mainly in retail. Is that fair to say?
I would say it's about a 50-50 split with retail and brands. Yeah.
Retail and brands. What is something consistent that you take with you whenever you start a new chapter or a new company? Some fundamentals that maybe you can tell our
Mm.
audience that you take with you at a new place.
Uh, First thing that comes to mind is the notion that purpose can fuel performance. Genuinely believe that to be true, have seen it, have been part of building towards that. When you know who you are and why you can be in a position to try to tackle something bigger than you'll ever be able to accomplish, but you're always in pursuit of. That to me is where you start to connect with your consumers and your categories beyond the items that you sell. If it's all about the individual sale or transaction, there's a lot of exposure in that. There's a lot of other brands and competitors that can circumvent that customer journey, and there you go, you lose that consumer. If you can connect with that consumer in a way that is beyond the products that you sell and through a shared purpose and something that you're always in pursuit of, you're going to find yourself continuing to push, and you're going to find yourself being able to evolve and move with culture in a much more agile way because you understand what your role is with this category, with this consumer. And as culture changes around you and those tides shift, you can have a more confident stance of what fits or what doesn't fit within your role. That is something first and foremost, I would say, from a external brand and consumer connection point, I always take with me. The other thing I would say that I take with me is that good ideas come from absolutely everywhere. So this is more of an internal culture that I bring with me, where the first point was more external. Internally, I try to enter an organization and create a sense of trust and safety with my teams and my peer groups as fast as possible because I've found that some of the best ideas come from individual contributors or partners that you work with in IT who are saying, "Hey, I saw that we're doing this. Maybe have you ever thought about it this way?" If I don't have an open door or a sort of accessible personality, I'm never going to hear those good ideas. So I always want to come into a business and create that sense of safety and trust to ensure that that culture and that of sharing and boldness and thinking can be embraced by every single level of this organization.
What's it like day one when you started a new place?
A combination of exhausting, energizing, and exciting. Those are the three words. They all happen to start with E, which is nice. But that is, I walk out of the door the first day that I'm in a business, and I probably have the best sleep that I ever get in the the rest of the year. My brain is a sponge. All the synapses are firing, and I'm just learn, 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 learn. And it's also just finally being at your first day is so exciting because it's not as if the offer comes the day before, right? You're typically sitting with these thoughts in your mind, and my wheels are turning from the first conversation that I got to have with Doug Palladini, our CEO, on this opportunity. So being able to finally be in the business after a process wraps up and you have the chance to join the organization is always incredibly exciting.
Parents are also looking at content in a new way. Obviously there's like social commerce is exploding.
Hmm.
Content's coming in all kinds of snackable formats. Do you think and the team think differently about marketing Carter's in a new way? Like think about how parents might be discovering you.
Yeah. The I'll just start with activating desire. That is our mission right now. We have spent a lot of time connecting with our consumers over the recent past around the value equation, really leaning very heavy on price and promotion. compared to where we're headed in the future. I think what we've done well is we've captivated the consumer to say, hey, we've got these products that you need at a value that you're ultimately open to, right? But we haven't necessarily progressed as far as we will in the future with regard to that emotional connection. I talked a bit about having a purpose greater than the products that you sell, bringing that forward and shining a bright light on not only that purpose, but how does it actually flow through the products and the collections that we are building for these consumers. And that might be a combination of scarcity. That might be a combination of collaborations, right? There's a lot of different ways to get after it. But I say activate desire because I think desire comes when you successfully put something in front of a consumer that they had no idea they needed or wanted, and you change that perception. It takes a lot within the product itself, within the brand storytelling, and how you're connecting with that consumer, and your ability to really understand what will resonate with them. And that is the charge that we're on when it comes to content in our future.
And it sounds like you have to do a real balancing act between price, promotion, value, and at the same time building long-term emotional brand connection and resonance with your audience. And that's
Easy,
kind of,
right?
yeah, that's really always easy to do. But that, I mean, that right there is soul and science, is how do you create a strong, unstoppable brand that connects while at the same time, showing value and delivering performance, and doing promotion and sales, and getting people in the door to buy, but also creating, you got to have that balancing act, and in different channels have different messages. And I'm sure you're working through all that now.
That's exactly right.
How do you communicate your values without turning it into like a values lecture?
I think it's more about modeling and living them, frankly. I think it's an opportunity if you're talking about an internal values exercise. I think it goes. I'll start with the leaders, right? It starts at the top. The fish rots from the head, they say. We have to show up every single day as leaders and truly live our values. It's if we don't, it opens up a can of worms, right?
No one else has to live them in the organization if you're not
Right.
living them.
Why would you? So I think holding ourselves to a different standard and expectation that we are modeling, not just speaking, is so key. When it comes to expressing our values and our purpose externally, it's so important to do, especially we're talking about parenting, right? I don't know about you as a parent, but I certainly felt judged in a number of different capacities when my son was young, and I might be out in public and he might have my phone in his hand or something like that, right? We've all been there, and you can feel some sense of judgment. We're not here to judge. We know how hard it is. We know how complicated it is. And so our role is not judgment and preaching our values. Our role is to bring a level of help and uplifting the individuals and communities that are helping to raise the future. And you have to uplift with recognition of where there are hardships, where there are pressure points, and how can we be a helpful resource, not a judgmental one.
What's the best thing about your new job?
I get to be in an environment that is surrounded by children. That is the best thing about my job. I've gone and I've worked in so many different categories and industries, right? And I love so many aspects of all of them. But when I get to do a creative review exercise and I'm looking at these beautiful, adorable, hilarious children, it is just a whole different ball game. I think that's absolutely the best part of my job because it reminds me that we have a chance, unlike so many categories, to have an impact on such a malleable phase of an individual's life. And we believe that happy kiddos make for a better grown up world, right? So if we can contribute to that happy kiddos and that quality childhood, I think the brain between 0 and age 6 has so much growth and development and forming happening. And that is our sweet spot for the consumer that we are serving. If there's a small role that we can play in improving that phase of that child's life, that pays back to me and my personal contributions as a professional more than any other category I could ever imagine myself being in.
So it sounds like what you love is the audience that you serve and the impact you can make in serving that audience.
Absolutely.
And what is the hardest thing about your current job?
The hardest thing about being in this position, which is, I would say, a double-edged sword. It's a great thing, but it's complicated. We are a multi-channel business. We have meaningful partnerships with some of the largest retailers in the nation. While we also have a very robust direct business that we do in our own stores. How do you triangulate the role that the consumer is playing in this market when they could transact in a bigger box environment or a marketplace environment, or going into a Carter's store directly, or our own website or our own app, right? How do we how do we make the decisions around where we place our bets to fuel those diverse journeys across a pretty wide age range as well? So 0 to 14 is our core age range.
I didn't realize it went up that high, that it went
Yes.
to, yeah, I always think about it as like a 0 to 10 proposition,
Right,
but
most
that's
people
really
do.
interesting.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
if you imagine the life stage change that happens between that age range, right? You have quite a lot of variations. And then we have 5 brands. So we have Carter's, we have Oshkosh Bagosh. Those are our core brands, but we also have incredible brands in Little Planet and Otter Avenue and Skip Hop that we are bringing to market to serve this category. So I think the hardest part of the role is just the complexity of all of the different ways that the brand can be sliced when it comes to the relationship the consumer holds.
so I want to touch on that for a minute. How do you determine how much energy and time you put into all the different brands, and then how you divide up the budget? Do you have assigned budgets per brand out of the gate? Do you get to determine who gets what? That's a lot to take on. Just doing Carter's would be like a full
A
time
full-time job. Yes,
situation.
exactly.
So, but then you have these like little more nascent brands you're trying to build up as well. And so, yeah, just how you split time and resources and money.
That's why I said it was complicated, right? So I think
Yeah.
I would say I first start at life stage of the brand. What stage are we in? And somebody like Otter Avenue, that's one of our brands, right? We just launched that brand back in, I think it was July of this year. So very new toddler brand, an incredible brand. And so when you have a new brand, you don't have any awareness, you don't have any existing consumers, you need to make the right investments to start to build that up. That is a different life stage as compared to, let's say, Oshkosh Bagosh, 130 years young in its brand, and also at a stage in which reinvention is upon us. That takes a different investment strategy. So I need to understand what the stage of each brand is in to define the playbook that we approach for each brand. The playbook then dictates the budget allocation. So that is sort of the trade-off or the balance that we strike in the planning process.
The CMO job is very challenging. It's very hard. From a lot of conversations I've had, if things are going well, that's fine. And once the business might have a bump, or one of those brands has a bump, marketing is usually up for blame. How do you manage internally, or manage up, or show the impact of the work you're doing, and really advocate for the marketing function within an organization?
Yeah, it goes to transparency in my experience. I'm a huge believer in what I call the say-do ratio.
Ooh, I love this. We uncovered something here. Say do ratio. I like that. All right.
Yes, the say-do ratio. How well are we executing against the things that we say we're going to do? That takes a level of transparency in partnership with my peers, with my leaders, with my boards to say, here are the commitments that we are making as an organization and a function. Here are the dependencies to make that successful. And so that way, if those dependencies shift, you might have to go back to square one and restate what you're going to do, right? So I think it's all about transparency. What gets measured gets managed as well, right? So measurement is key. How do we make sure that we can identify those early indicators that we would watch for to say if something's working or not working? Because as we know in this notion of art and science, or soul and science rather, that you are going to be executing different tactics that are measured in very different ways. Um, time is usually the variance in that. And I can execute a paid social ad and I'll have a 14-day attribution window. Okay, pretty straightforward. If I'm going to do a pop-up event in Brooklyn, New York, launching a new brand, am I going to expect a 14-day attribution window for that investment? No, it operates very differently. It plays a very different role with our consumer. So I need to be very transparent with my stakeholders about how I'm measuring success and not signing up for manufactured KPIs because it's more comfortable for a stakeholder. So that is my approach. Transparency, very frequent updates, identifying those early indicators, and really building that accountability in my function through my leaders around that say-do ratio.
I love the say do ratio. And I also love what you mentioned, which is make sure you're applying the objectives, the goals in reality, and you're not signing up for something that you know is a stretch just to please whoever you might be reporting to.
Exactly. That's
And
right.
I think that's really great advice is keep it achievable and realistic. And if things change, like the budget gets smaller or there's less products or whatever it might be, you can make sure you're, not still signing up for the same goals, but adjusting accordingly.
That's right. I mean, I think it's the Mike Tyson quote, right? I don't, I'm probably going to get this somewhat wrong, but there's always a plan until you get punched in the face. How are you going to react? I've literally never been in an organization where the annual plan I have set has been exactly the plan that was deployed 365 days later. There's always agility needed. And I think if I could impress upon organizations from a marketing perspective, you actually can do yourself some significant harm in setting too rigid of expectations across the board. So if, for example, an organization says, yeah, marketing investment, you need to hit a $7 return on ad spend for all of your investments that you make. Okay, you may be thinking you're doing the right thing by saying that, but what can happen as a result is unintended consequences, where then my investments might be placed in areas that I know can achieve that return, but it may not be an incremental value back to the brand and the business. I may just say, okay, I'm just going to invest in all branded terms and search results and things of that nature. Well, if the consumer's already searching for your brand, is it really incremental? And is that the best way to spend your money to hit that goal? So I think in how you establish goals is so critically important to defining the behavior that you want to see your organization take hold of.
What are you particularly good at? What are you skilled at that maybe other people are skilled in different ways, but that you're very confident in your ability?
Um, I get told by my leaders and my teams that I have a good sense of emotional intelligence, which I maybe pick that one because that's maybe my favorite compliment I've been able to achieve. And I think it's so important as a team leader. And at this position in my career, the most important thing that I can do is be a really good team leader. And so I really put as much investment in delivering on that as anything, and it takes the number one slot. Emotional intelligence and being a team leader is so incredibly important because I have to recognize that every player on my team has a personality difference, has a motivation difference. Their agenda might be slightly different. I need to be able to connect with them, and one way to connect is not the same way to connect with another individual. So to be successful at kind of reading the room has helped me in forging faster relationships, more trusted relationships. And that, in my experience, unlocks that safety that allows teams to then be willing to take risks. And I don't think that there's any winning without that.
What's a business challenge that keeps you up at night? And maybe nothing keeps you up at night because you're exhausted, but
Because my brain is on
from
fire.
because you have 17 brands that you have to work on. But let's say one night you did stay up. What would be a business challenge that you really are focused on?
I think every strength has a balcony and a basement, I say, right? So I think our strength in our having our five brands, having a multi-channel business, that is a absolute strength. I think the business challenge that may keep me up at night, I do sleep well. My Aura ring tells me so. But it does keep me up at night, is really that opportunity to focus for impact. So I think when we're in a target rich environment, which we absolutely are, being able to find the right things to focus on and not get totally distracted by all of the other opportunities is probably the closest thing to something that keeps me up at night.
When there's so many things to do and get a hold of and grow the brand and challenges and opportunities, focus is really kind of the hardest thing.
It's the hardest thing.
Am I spending the limited resources and people and time that I have on the right things?
Exactly.
Okay, last question for you. Thank you for this has been a great podcast. Sarah, do you have a mantra or a quote that guides you, that you live by, that you fall back to, that you think about all the time?
I do. And in fact, I've actually been considering getting it permanently inked on me because I love it
Oh,
so
I love
much.
it. I love it. I love a
I
tattoo.
haven't quite decided yet, but it is one that I love so much. So thank you for the question. So the quote that I stumbled upon this somehow years and years ago, and it just really speaks to me. And it is, beware the lollipop of mediocrity. Lick it once and you'll suck forever. And that is actually a Brian Wilson quote from the Beach Boys, which
Oh,
I
no
don't
way.
actually know the context by which he arrived at it, but certainly speaks to me. And I think it's pretty telling as to why.
I love that. Well, he was known as in the studio being like going take and take and take, like going, like being like
That's the
very,
perfectionist.
very, yeah, very much a perfectionist and insane. It would drive everyone crazy.
And I
And I
definitely am
think,
not a perfectionist. So it's not because of that that I love it, but
no,
I
but
do
I love
certainly
that.
love the intention of what it means.
I love that quote. You get sort of, you drop down a level, you let something slide, and before you know it,
That's
that's
right.
kind of where the
That sets
bar
the
is.
bar. Hmm.
That sets the bar. All right. Well, thanks so much.
Thank
Lot
you,
of pearls
Jason.
of wisdom. A lot of pearls of wisdom today. So we appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Great chatting with you.
Soul and Science is a Mechanism podcast produced by Maggie Bowles, Ryan Tillotson, and Lily Jablonski. The show is edited by Daniel Ferreira with theme music by Kyle Merritt. And I'm your host, Jason Harris.